Okay, so this is the Easthampton Affordable and Fair Housing Partnership on January 31st, and it is 6:11 p.m. All right, Jamie, do you want to tell us what this is that we're looking at?
Yeah, so this is the final draft of the CPA grant application for the capital needs assessments for the 5 single-room occupancy housing properties in Easthampton. One's owned by the city of the Town Lodging House, the other 4 owned by Southern Middlesex Opportunity Council, or SMOC.
Mm-hmm.
All 5 are actually managed by SMOC, which is why this is coming together. In total, there's about 65 units of housing that's, it's all specialty housing, so it's for, you can see on the first page there, there's recovery-focused housing. Most of it's for recovery-focused people dealing with addiction. Some of it's co-ed, some of it's for females, some for males, and then the Town Lodging House is not recovery. It's not specifically recovery focused. It's just single room occupancy. So a lot of these people that end up living here are referred from some of the social service agencies in the area, like ServiceNet and the Grove Street Shelter in Northampton, and the reason why we are, the reason why we're looking at this for CPA funding is that we don't have a good sense of what the current state of those buildings are, whether or not it is, decent, safe, affordable housing, or if it's in bad repair. We know that there are some issues with some of the properties, but we don't have like a comprehensive, this is what needs to happen at each of the properties and how important it is to take care of those capital needs. So this is basically should be a pretty quick project to hire a consultant to conduct a capital needs assessment on each of the 5 properties and come up with a report that we can then use to figure out how to do a design project for those actual repairs. So it's yes. Hang on a second. Questions, I guess? Sorry, I think I missed something.
I do have a quick question.
Yeah.
Who created this document?
I put it together.
Okay, so then it would just be a writing question.
Yeah.
So on number 1, it's the process, so you would do a CNA,
Mm-hmm.
and then the way that you wrote it could just be a writing thing, then sounds as though then you would hire someone else to do something similar? Do you see how in the, conducting a CNA on the 5 properties would be the first of 3 to improve the quality of upon receiving the funding for this project, the city and SMOC would put together an RFR for, so you're basically saying if the money is approved, then you would put out an RFP
For the CNA.
Okay, so it's only, that makes sense.
Yeah,
Got it.
because we don't, it's taken me way too long just to get this.
Got it. That makes sense, okay.
We don't have the capabilities. If we had the capabilities in-house.
No, that makes perfect sense. It almost appeared as though you were doing it twice, that's why I didn't understand it.
Okay, could I make that more clear? Do you have a suggestion?
Does it have to be, who approves this? Does it have to be submitted to someone else to understand it?
Yeah, so this is gonna go to the committee,
Ooh, I'm sorry.
the CPA committee. Their meeting's gonna be February 26th.
Mm-hmm.
It's a Tuesday. They're meeting outside of their normal schedule. So I hope that everyone can make it.
Evening?
It's evening, it's 6:30 p.m. in the first floor conference room. That's February 26th at 6:30. And so they're gonna get this, and there's gonna be a brief presentation, and then question and answer, and if people from this group can make it, that'd be great, because it shows support for this project
Yeah.
within the community.
Is someone from SMOC gonna be able to make it?
Yes, they're gonna be, not Matt, who we had met with, but they hired a new project manager who is gonna come out from Framingham for
Good.
meeting. So, yeah, so this is the final draft, and because it's coming from the planning department, the housing partnership, and SMOC, any comments or questions, things I can like make changes to it. It hasn't been submitted to CPA yet, so.
I have a very small editing.
Yeah.
It's in the second paragraph that it almost sounds like, because it says conducting a CNA will be the first phase. And then it
Yeah.
says upon receiving the funds, the city will put out an RFP. So it almost appears
Yep.
as though you do the CNA, and that I would just cross off that first conducting. It would make more sense to me if it
Yeah.
started upon receiving the funding for the project, the city
Yeah.
and SMOC would put out an RFP, and then that cleans it up.
And actually, it's
Just get rid of that
city
first
and
sentence.
the housing partnership.
Yeah.
And so this will also allow, the consultant could also explore the possibility of adding some of these units to the SHI.
Yeah, but the
Possible.
quote that I got that's attached toward the back here
Yeah,
does not include that.
okay.
It's the CNA is really just about, doing the assessment and the analysis
Okay.
and,
So maybe we can do that without the consultant, maybe.
Yeah, I think that's something that, so preliminary research, there's nothing in they don't need to be upgraded to be the super SROs in order to qualify an SHI. We
Okay.
just need,
Subsidized
we-
housing inventory, sorry, is there?
Yeah, I
know what
see
you're
that
saying.
here.
we would need to work with SMOC as the owner of the properties to let us deed restrict those properties. And then once they're deed restricted, then we can do a local action project to get them listed on the SHI. So that process is really, I think it's between the city and SMOC, or the housing partnership and SMOC, and
What's a local action project?
so, under the Department of Housing and Community Development's regulations, they have, you can get a 40B project, and they're the subsidizing agency for that project, and it gets added to the subsidized housing inventory by virtue of,
Is that weird?
you need it.
You were supposed to
You
call
didn't
us.
bother with the
That was
elevator.
actually easier than the elevator.
Oh, good job.
There's an empty seat on this side of the table if you wanna.
Here.
Oh, and there's an empty seat on that side of the table.
Just give me all of them.
Yeah, thank you.
So the PHCD has two processes by which they can add units to the housing, subsidized housing inventory. One is when they are the subsidizing agency, and the other is when it's a local project.
So
And
this is
in
the local project.
And so in this case, yeah, there wouldn't be, like, for 40B development, they're getting they're getting tax credits or affordable housing credit, money, so the subsidy's coming from DHCD. In this case, there's no subsidy for these units, they're just cheap. Yeah, and so the CPA, the CPA could condition future funds on, if there's future improvements, the CPA could condition funding those projects on receiving affordable deed restriction.
Or if CPA money was used again towards some of the improvements, right? So
Right, that's,
that was-
but for $10,000,
Right,
it's not really, we don't really have much leverage
right.
with SMOC for $10,000,
Mhm.
other than they wanna be a good partner to the city and it's in their interest to deed restrict it.
Mhm.
But it may not be in their interest to deed restrict it.
Okay.
So,
So we can explore it.
All right.
Do you think that the CPA committee is going to care that there's no deed restriction on the table for this particular, I mean, it's only $13,000, so it's not a lot of money, but.
I don't
Okay.
think that they will,
Previous iterations of the CPA committee have cared, but I don't know if this particular group is as
I mean,
picky.
we'll see.
Okay. Is Dan Rist still on the committee?
He is.
Okay,
I mean, they like projects that add to the SHI,
right.
but these are existing units that are affordable and, you know, the SHI is a means to an end, and the units are already affordable, they're just not counted. So we'll see if that's something they really care about, and if it is, then we'll go down that road.
What does SHI stand for?
Subsidized housing inventory.
Okay.
You know, it's like our percent.
Yeah.
What is Easthampton?
We're like 7.5% right now.
Not too bad.
It
It'll go down, right?
will
the
go down
2020 census.
after the 2020 census.
Why?
Because the base number of our percent is fixed at the last census. So as we add new units throughout the city, they don't count against us until the next census. So for instance, if there's 5,000 units in the city in 2010,
Mm-hmm.
and we build 200 units a year, then 10 years later,
Mm.
that 5,000 should be 7,000, but those numbers all come online after the 2020 census, not as they're actually added. But the subsidized, the new subsidized units get added every time they're added. So we have this weird thing where we get credit for the new subsidized units, but we don't get penalized for the new market rate units.
But in 2020, everything's gonna catch up.
Yes.
Yeah.
So we're gonna drop.
Yeah, but across the state,
Everybody.
everybody will drop.
A lot?
Depends on how much growth there's been in the community of market
Mhm.
rate versus subsidized housing.
Hmm.
I mean, we haven't had a ton of growth. I think we had, was it 250 units or so of housing the last 5 or 6 years? And that includes the 15 cottage and Parsons Village, so,
Mm-hmm.
you know, so 15 cottage and Parsons Village got added to the top.
Right.
So our numbers went up, but they didn't get added to the denominator,
Right.
so.
Mhm.
So they okayed this money?
No.
No.
This
Oh,
is
they
the,
didn't?
this is the
Yeah.
application that we're,
Oh,
CPA
okay.
will be meeting on this on February 26th, it's a Tuesday, at 6:30 PM upstairs. The first floor conference room.
We haven't asked for any housing money in a while, correct?
No, the last money we asked for was the
First time.
first-time
homebuyer.
home buyer and housing rehab project from, I think that's now like 2 or 3 years ago.
A couple of years ago,
It's
anyway.
like 2016 at least.
The housing rehab money has been used up.
Okay.
The first-time home buyer money is half used. There's been a lot of demand for first-time homeowners. There's a list of 30 or so applicants who have been income qualified and are looking for housing in Easthampton. The problem's been that, given their price range of what they can afford, there's no housing available, and when there has been housing in Easthampton, it's been bid up so quickly
Mm.
that they're bidding wars, and then that makes the house.
That's not accessible to those people.
Yeah.
Right.
So even with the first-time home buyer, like, the small amount of money that we're giving,
They're
it's
still
not-
edged out.
They're, exactly, so we would, so the Valley CDC's been trying to, you know, continue the, and there's just a lack of supply.
Yeah. Anything like in the 275 or under is gone in like
Yeah.
Yeah.
days.
Yeah. There was a couple of there was one house that was on the market, and right before the, I guess the everything closed, someone went in and vandalized the place. And one of the other ones it got all the way through to the end of the project, and the applicant chose to get a adjustable rate mortgage, not a fixed rate mortgage, and that disqualified them from the program. So,
No.
and it's because the adjustable rate mortgages are not, there's no guarantee that the mortgage payment is going to be affordable
Right,
All right,
going
that's-
forward.
but it just
Mhm.
seems like an error on the
Well,
part of the applicant. that-
They were made aware of it at multiple
Okay.
times throughout the process,
Okay.
and then they
They
decided,
really made the choice.
they made the choice to go with the adjustable rate mortgage.
Oh, boy.
Because it felt it's affordable at the moment.
Exactly.
Did they wind up getting it now?
Yes, they did. They
But
bought
without the
house,
down payment.
But without the down payment assistance. So,
That's kinda
you know, in some ways,
Alright.
like, I guess they didn't need the down payment assistance even though they qualified for it, so.
Right, it's not a
Now it's
tragedy.
available for someone else, but still, we would have,
Been able to
Yeah.
spend our money.
yeah.
Yeah, you would have had a success.
So, I mean, so the CPA may ask about, well, we already have projects open, and why are we looking for more money when our projects are open? And it's largely
Pretty
through,
different projects.
circumstances outside of this group's control.
Right.
And it's not from just like not being able to, not wanting to spend it, or
Mhm.
not putting in the efforts.
Sure.
Well, this seems like a project that would be very easy to spend.
Yes.
Yeah.
put
Do you
it
think
out.
you'd use this service, the person from whom, the Kelly Green?
We would have to put out an RFP, so they would have to,
Okay.
they would have to be a, you know, and this is something that, once the funding gets awarded, this group and the planning department, and SMOC will figure out what the, what we're looking for exactly in the RFP, and then we have to, you know, collect responses and then evaluate them and choose the most advantageous consultant. We can choose to go either at fixed price or, so you can just do RFP based on qualifications and then have contract negotiation afterwards for what the price is, or you can do a request for qualifications that includes price, but then sometimes you end up going with the low bidder and not the most advantageous.
Right, can't they like submit their RFP and then like submit the price separately or something and you open?
Well, yeah, that's,
Isn't
so
that
that's
what-
exactly, yeah,
And
so.
then you open the price after,
Or you tell them that we have $10,000 to spend, and that's gonna be, you know
Right.
that's gonna be, everybody's gonna submit a proposal for $10,000, and you're just evaluating the qualifications.
Is there a minimum number of bids that you need to get?
One.
Could it be as few as one?
One will do.
I don't know, I would have to check the
I don't know if
procurement.
there are any rules around it.
There are probably, I think as long as we do all of the appropriate public procurement process,
Right.
as long as we get a single bidder, usually that's fine.
Okay.
I would say the last couple times we've done it,
Yeah.
like Habitat was the only bidder for the East Street parcel and Valley CDC was the only bidder for the first time home buyer, so I think it's
Mhm.
been fine. I did draft a support letter that's in this packet.
Oh, yeah.
If people wanna look at it and comment on it.
And then if you wanna sign this,
Oh, okay.
that
Well,
was-
does anyone have any, if anyone wants any changes, I'm happy to make them.
assuming there are no changes.
Assuming there's no changes, I can sign it. Actually, is it deed restricted? So I wrote it's currently not deed restricted, but it's on the SHI,
Um,
so I should change that part. Cause I didn't think it was for some reason.
It is deed restricted. This is one of those, I'm not fully sure how it is deed restricted. I'm pretty sure it counts on the SHI, and I'm also pretty sure that
Which one is deed restricted?
Town lodging.
Town lodging.
And,
Oh.
the weird thing is that, so there's 23 units listed on the SHI, the town lodging house. There's, according to, SMOC, but there are 15 units in that building. According to the housing production plan, there's 16 units in that building. And so this is all things that will get clarified as we do this assessment.
Well, I think I should change that part of the letter though, cause I say it's a critical piece of our housing stock that is affordable even though it's not currently deed restricted.
Yeah.
You have it listed as deed restricted.
It is, they have the town lodging house has a historic preservation restriction and a housing
Okay,
restriction.
so I'll change that.
Okay.
I mean, I just think I think it's really compelling that there's 65 units. It's a lot of units
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
of really, critical housing that
Yeah.
serves very vulnerable people.
Exactly.
Maybe I should add that in here somewhere. Now that I have that there's 65 units.
Yeah, it doesn't say how many.
It does, and then my letter doesn't, but under number 1, it says 65 units of housing.
Plus or minus.
Plus or minus.
Has there been any code enforcement in any of these units that were called out? Any complaints? or
Oh, yeah.
anything?
There have been, I don't have code enforcement, but I know that there have been,
65.
part of what started this was, at the town lodging house, there's a back porch that is in need of repair.
Mhm.
And I don't think it rises to the level of code enforcement because we haven't done anything about it. But the town lodging house is very complicated because it has that historic preservation restriction on it. All of the exterior improvements have to be done in historically appropriate manner.
Hanson building.
But no one has called code to, we don't have any code reports on any of them.
I haven't looked into that.
No, just, it can sometimes make things more dire and compelling if code enforcement has been out and said.
Which ones are historical?
Town lodging.
About
But I
Vikings
think,
Landing, that one?
honestly, I think some of the other ones might qualify as well.
As historical?
They don't have historic preservation restrictions on it, but judging off the age of the properties and what they were used for beforehand. The 21 Adams Street, a very nice looking building. The Right Home for Women has a slate, just looking at the pictures, has a slate roof. These are like indicators that the buildings are probably older than 50 years old, and that's the minimum requirement for, being a historic property.
Does that make them eligible for CPA money under the historic?
It
Category?
does, but it also restricts how that money can be used. In that, if it's funded under historic preservation, then all the repairs, everything done in that building has to be done according to the Secretary of the Interior's department. The guidelines for historic preservation, which just, it would add a lot of cost.
Right.
So there's no benefit to acknowledging the historical significance of these buildings?
I mean, there might, that makes the case for why we should try to preserve them as opposed to running them into the ground and then knocking them down and rebuilding them. But we don't get extra money from CPA. It doesn't qualify us for more. I mean, there are very small amount of money from the state for historic properties and things like that, but.
So you get about the same amount of money, right? Whether it's historical or not?
Well, we could certainly ask them for more money, but.
Right, and at this point in time, with this capital needs assessment, we'll get a better understanding of each of the properties when they were built,
Right.
what the needs
Yeah.
are, and whether or not it's something that we wanna pursue doing a historic preservation restriction on.
Yeah,
But
can we-
given, but
can we
given, but
just get-
given the two, between the affordable housing restrictions and the historic preservation restriction, that's really limiting any future reuse of those properties
Right.
if both of those restrictions get put
Yeah,
onto it.
I see that.
It takes a lot of the property value away from it, which, being owned by nonprofits, doesn't affect the city's taxable income, but it does affect what SMOC has, for their portfolio of property.
Their flexibility as owners or
Yeah.
managers.
If something looks like it's probably historical, but no one has claimed it as such yet, can we ignore that? Just-
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
Because the way that the historic process works is, so the historical commission will, if it was important to them, they might have a file that shows that it was, who the owners were and when it was built and what, and stuff like that. So it'll be inventoried, but even that inventory doesn't make the property, doesn't stop the owner from doing anything on that property, except in the case of someone wanting to demolish that property, then they can do a demolition delay of up to 6 months or something.
Okay. Well, I'll make some changes to my letter. Do you need the original, or can I
If you can scan,
can scan it? Is
or
that-
if you wanna sign there, I can cut and paste.
Well, I could.
Well, all you gotta do is knock out that one word, not.
Here, I'll knock it out right here.
Knock it out.
Well, I was gonna add something about 65 units serving our
But no,
mobile.
I don't need the original.
Okay.
And even if it wasn't signed, I would put it in.
Well, I can certainly sign it and scan it to you.
Yeah, that's fine, I don't need the original.
Guys are
I
tricky.
can drop off the original
I
next week.
don't need it.
All right.
If you can scan it, then
Okay.
that's sufficient.
Where's Jackie tonight?
She's not here.
Thank you.
She had something else she had to do.
Other thoughts, any other thoughts about this?
Thank you for doing it. I'm
Yeah,
really
thank you.
excited about this project.
Yeah, it seems really straightforward and positive and yay.
And I will look into whether or not there was any code enforcements.
So when do you have to get this to the CPA?
I'm gonna send it to them next week.
So that'll be in time for their next meeting?
Yes, it will.
Will they decide right then and there, or
No, they won't.
fiddle around with it for a while?
They will, generally the CPA, they, at the first meeting, they listen and ask questions, and then they, take a month to think about it, and,
Scratch their butt, yeah.
and then they come back, and generally, the second meeting, they will approve it, but sometimes they have additional things came up, and then they want some more time. They also like to have these, project funding agreements that they include now with the funds, so usually at the second
They have a
meeting,
lot to do with
they
it.
give out these agreements, and then there's, another month to go back and forth about any
Oh,
changes
sure.
to it or things
Because
like
it's
that.
like the contract.
Basically, yeah.
So, all right, so
Okay.
best case scenario,
We
we're
are.
looking at March.
I'll behave.
Right,
And then it goes to city council.
Yes, full city council, then it gets sent
So
to subcommittee,
subcommittee, and then
where they hold a
back.
public hearing, and then it goes back to city council for their full hearing. So that's why in the timeline,
Oh, okay.
I put in, assuming it's awarded by the end of April, which would take into account CPA taking 2 to 3 months on it, and city council taking 6 weeks.
Okay.
That this would get underway in May.
We would start dealing with the RFP.
Yeah.
Oh, we could start dealing with the RFP, because it's not gonna cost anything.
Right.
Just time. So we could start dealing with the RFP.
As soon as if you knew it was
As soon as we
approved.
know, as soon as CPA committee votes to approve the funds, it's unlikely that city council would not, it doesn't seem like it's very contentious.
It's not a lot of money.
But as far as the support from this group, it would be great to have everyone at the
Yeah,
first
plan to do
CPA
that.
meeting,
Mhm.
but probably not, everyone doesn't need to show up again until it's in front of the full city council when they're actually doing their hearing. So.
The first one,
No,
the second one,
Yeah.
after subcommittee.
After it comes from subcommittee.
Right.
Or it's good to show up at that subcommittee, but we'll have an idea based on,
You can just tell us what to do and we'll do it.
yeah. But I think the important one is if people can come to that first CPA meeting, just to show support for this, then that is helpful.
Okay.
And not everybody, you don't have to speak or say anything if you don't want to. If you want to, there'll be an opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, just rough idea. So CPA says, okay, you can have it, we'll give you the money. And then we get the properties assessed for cost for doing the repairs. And how long do you think it'll be before they actually start working on the buildings?
Well, we don't have any money for that.
A long time.
Oh, okay, that's right, then we get, okay.
So then.
Yeah,
so
after
this
we
could be
find
like-
out what they need, then we gotta ask for the money to fix it.
This could be a year or two easily.
Oh, a
then.
couple, yeah.
Yeah, but what I've, in conversations with SMOC, they have, like, they can do things on their properties. They can do things at the town lodging house that are within the lease agreement that don't require, if they don't need money, if they have, like, they have maintenance staff, they have people who can take care of, so once these issues get identified, they can start to address them. Not all of them will need to go through a full design with an architect and, you know, I would think the town lodging house will, because that is a historic property. But the other ones, you know, they need to just, you know, do some plumbing improvements or electric improvements or put in a handicap ramp, or those are all things that they should be able to just go to the building commissioner, get a building permit and do. And they have funds for maintenance and repairs of their buildings, they don't necessarily have funds for assessments of their buildings.
Right.
Okay.
Okay.
So some of these could be taken care of at no cost to the city, once the report is finalized.
But the big items will take a while.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
It's $13,000 and it's $13,200 that you're requesting, right?
Yeah,
Yes.
and that was my rough guess at, you know, what, in addition to the capital needs assessment for $10,000. I know there's RFP cost for advertising.
Yeah.
There's legal review of contracts and things
Mhm.
like that, and then contingency.
Okay.
So I'm going to look into that a little bit more on Monday, just to make sure that those numbers seem accurate, and then.
Right.
So the 13,200 might go up a little bit or down a little bit.
Right, so you'll get a more accurate estimate based on some research and be ready for that at the meeting.
Yeah, I'm just gonna look at what we've spent
In
in
the
our,
past.
like,
Yeah,
what the
great.
advertising costs have been.
Advertising is so expensive.
It is.
Yeah, in the Daily Hampshire Gazette?
Well, there's also, for RFPs, it has to go, there's this, there's the central register, and then combis, and, you know, if we wanna do it in the Daily Hampshire Gazette, that only is a local, but if we want more people to, like,
Yeah.
theoretically see it,
Sure.
there's a lot of free advertising that we can get to.
Yeah. Skywriting?
Well, there's like, you know, Mass Municipal listserv and
Mhm.
planners listservs and.
Yeah.
so.
Great. Next on the agenda, Haley was gonna talk about the Council on Aging report.
Yeah, so I think it would have been ideal if had I been able to make a copy of this for everyone, but you can see it's really long, and I did send it to you all today as an attachment, so I invite you to take a look at this at your leisure. Looking through, so housing is a very significant theme in this study, and Kate, for your benefit, I'll mention what this is. The Easthampton Council on Aging commissioned the Center for Social and Demographic Research on Aging Gerontology Institute, which is, you know, part of the McCormick Graduate School of Policy and Global Studies at UMass Boston, to do this report that was based on a lot of, you know, a lot of census data, and they also did a pretty robust survey of older adults in the city to get data on the needs of older adults in this community. And it just came out this past October. And so, you know, 1,800 surveys were completed, which I'm really amazed by that number, to tell you the truth. So I thought that what I could do in this meeting would be to just kind of glance over some of the facts in regards to housing as I see them overlapping with our housing production plan. And I'm reading this, our housing production plan, which is due for a revision. It's from 2014 with an eye to, we talked about this at our last meeting, I'm highlighting the data that's going to need to be updated. And I'm also looking at it through an aging lens, and we'll be thinking about how data from this can be added, if that is appropriate. Anyway, that's what we're thinking about, okay? So just kind of a quick review of some of the facts on older adults and housing in this region. So you won't probably be surprised to find that the survey indicated that economic insecurity is a concern for most of the respondents of the survey. 1/3 of householders aged 65 and older report household incomes of under $25,000 annually. Escalating property tax.
Under 25,000?
Under 25,000, yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah. They're concerned about property taxes. In fact, a couple of the recommendations of the people who wrote this are that tax deferment and a property tax work-off program be introduced in the city, and I don't believe there's been a welcoming attitude about a tax work-off program in the past. That could change. Tax deferment is, property tax deferment is kind of a well-hidden secret that I know that people in the tax office are not really interested in making well-known, but it is a resource that people can simply defer their taxes until they die, and then have the value of that tax, a lien on the house, but the value of the house is very likely to greatly exceed what they're not paying in taxes. But of course, the city doesn't, naturally and understandably, doesn't want to lose, you know, thousands of dollars a year to that process. Okay, so it's too much to just blather on about all this. I will say that about the first half of the report, if you do have a chance to get through to look at it, is focused. I mean, housing is a very significant topic in that portion of it. Let's see.
How many elders, are we defining elders as people over 60?
Yeah, 60
many
and
in-
older. 26% of Easthampton residents are 60 and older. It is sort of considered an older community, compared to statistics, you know, statewide. There's a lot of reportage on homeowners and talking about their homes needing repairs and modifications that they can't afford. And seems like there's a lot of low-hanging fruit opportunity to help people with that particular situation. And then there are a lot of bigger things like roof repairs, but home modifications, I feel, should be a solvable problem. But a lot of people are feeling like they can't deal with it. But it's a problem, and it's getting in the way of aging in place. So 1/3 of the surveyed homeowners say their current residence needs home repairs, such as a new roof, and 35% say they need home modifications, such as grab bars. That was significant to me. I see that a lot.
Jamie, does Easthampton have any programs?
We do. So we have community development block grant funds, which are available for.
CDBG funds.
Yep. Are available. We have.
For modifications?
Housing rehab program. It's not for
Okay.
Modifications. It is for code violations and safety and I guess health code violations.
Mhm.
So, you know, a new roof is a safety and health problem.
Okay.
It's a code violation.
Yeah.
If the roof is leaking, it's a code violation. If you don't have railings on your house and you need them, it's not a code violation if you need a ramp.
Right.
Or you need a roll in, a shower that you can roll your
Right.
chair in. We do also have, there's another program, it's what's it called?
What's this program called?
So that's through the Community Development Block Grant Housing Rehab Program. And so we've applied over the years to the state for this program. We currently have, under the 2018 grant, we have about $100,000 for housing rehab. So
Is that in just the
Total?
target area though?
no, so in 2017, they removed the requirements for the target area.
Okay.
So prior to 2017, all of our housing rehab, you had to live in
Certain neighborhoods.
this basically this area here in order to qualify. In 2017, the DHCD removed that target area restriction.
Okay.
So the 2018 grant that we have, housing rehab, can be used anywhere in the city. That being said, you still have to qualify as a low to moderate income household.
Yeah.
Which most seniors would qualify according to what you just said, if they're making less than $25,000.
Yeah, and anecdotally, I can tell you that seems to be the case.
Yeah, so most of the seniors should qualify. The funding's limited. We have, like I said, we had about $100,000 from the 2018 grant
Total.
which the average project is about $25,000
Right.
when you're using these funds. Sometimes they're a little bit less and we can squeeze out another project, but we're looking at 3 or 4 units.
Yeah.
And
And you'll get more money for 2019, right?
maybe. I can talk more about that later. There's an item on the agenda about the CDBG hearing.
Can people apply at any time, or is there a grant deadline situation with
They can,
this
it's
fund?
rolling applications. I
What
have-
office?
It's, Pioneer Valley Planning Commission is managing the program for us,
Okay.
and I can get you,
Pioneer Valley what?
Planning Commission. Let me, I'll grab, we have a little form.
Yeah, thank you. That would be a great resource.
Oh boy, I'm excited. I have radon in my house. I wonder if something like this, because I've been trying to figure out what to do about it. My house is on a slab, and I believe there's a barrier paint they can use
Hmm.
to paint it.
That's a question probably for
So
Jamie.
that's,
Thank
It
you.
is.
That's for the numbers on the bottom are old, they're 2016 numbers. The other program that we have for accessibility issues is the Home Modification Loan Program,
Mm-hmm.
and that's also run by Pioneer Valley Planning Commission for Easthampton. It's also, you might have heard that CDAC, which is the Community Economic Development and Assistance Corporation.
Mm-hmm.
And these put a permanent lien on your home for the cost of the repair.
Okay.
So,
When the house is sold, that has to be paid back.
exactly. Whereas the housing rehab funds are a deferred payment loan. So
Mhm.
when the house is sold, a percentage has to be paid back based on
Mhm.
how long you've owned the
Right, and that
house.
percentage goes down, right?
It goes
So
down,
it could
and it's,
be
if
0.
after 15 years, it's entirely forgiven,
Yeah,
but it's a 1/15 per year forgiven.
okay.
So I'll give you.
These phone numbers are still all
Yep.
the ones?
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
And I can send you digital versions of that if you need to make copies or.
Thank you, Jamie, that's great.
I'm gonna ask a question. My house has radon in it,
Mm-hmm.
and it's, I think, at 4, which is, they say that's when you need to start thinking about doing something about it.
Okay.
And it's built on a slab, and I've been trying to figure out what they could do about it, and I believe there's a barrier paint you can use, but it would entail tearing up all the laminate flooring, which while we're at it, I'd really like to get carpeting in there, because the floor is really slippery and ice cold. Would something like that qualify, do you think?
Don't know off the top of my head. I mean,
Just wondering.
I don't know the specifics of at what point it becomes a code enforcement issue or becomes
It's a safety.
a safety issue or how that works,
Yeah.
I would encourage you to call Pioneer Valley Planning Commission, and the number's 413-781-6045.
Springfield,
Yep.
Pioneer Valley,
Planning Commission.
And tell them that you are interested in speaking to someone who's running the Easthampton Housing Rehab Program or the Home Modification Loan Program.
Are you in dialogue with the new public health officer, Bree?
Our office is around the corner.
Okay. Well, I feel like I'm getting a lot
Catch the
of,
second part.
information
I
from
can't
her
write
about
and this is at the
households that
same
are,
time.
It's you were the
having
person
troubles,
who's in charge of the
that I think might be applicable
Yeah,
to
and then there was
these
another one.
programs.
I'm sorry.
home modification.
Okay.
Can you start again?
The public health officer
Yeah.
Thank you.
keeps me in the loop with households with older adults that are having various issues. Some have nothing to do with your work, but,
Yeah.
or these kinds of interventions.
Mhm.
But I think that, I just would like you to, if you haven't already,
Yeah,
and she
I-
may already be very well versed in it, I have no idea, but I just would recommend.
We have talked,
communicating.
we have talked about it,
Yeah.
because she previously worked for
Greenfield?
Greenfield, thank you. And so she was familiar with it because Greenfield also gets housing rehab funds
Yeah, that's
from
why
the
that's-
CDBG program. But they are a entitlement community or a mini entitlement community. They get their money without having to, having to do as much
They're
application.
it's not competitive, right?
Yeah, it's not competitive because they're
Interesting.
more needy.
Yeah, okay,
Um,
yeah.
They still have to meet the same national objectives, they still have to
Mhm.
meet like low and moderate income
Mhm.
individuals, but they basically have a guaranteed source of income to run these programs year after year. We have to keep applying.
And
Yeah.
we're becoming less needy, correct?
Yes.
Or we appear less needy?
We are definitely appearing to be less needy.
Yeah, right, definitely hearing.
Um, So,
Okay, yeah, she's very dogged in finding out about resources, so I
Yeah.
think she'd be really interested.
so she is aware of it.
Okay.
We had a conversation early on. She said, "Does Easthampton do this? We used to do this in Greenfield." So,
Okay, okay. Just some facts related to housing and older adults. 42% of Easthampton households have one 60-year-old or, one person age 60 or older living in it. 42%, that's pretty high.
That's really high.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is.
Okay, and owner-occupied housing. 45% of owner-occupied housing in Easthampton is owned by people age 60 or more.
Oh, wow.
So that was pretty, that's pretty stunning. I don't know why, it just seemed like, wow, that's a big number.
That's a big number.
In terms of general attitudes about wanting to remain in one's own home, I don't think it would be a surprise to anyone to know that most people want to, and most people want to stay in Easthampton. 56% of people 60 and over reported that they felt it was very important to stay in Easthampton. So there's a strong sense of community loyalty and attachment that is here. There's some really, okay, there are some great quotes from people, but I think that in the interest of time, I'll skip them, but I like them a lot. 8 out of 10 respondents to the community survey were homeowners, and most lived in a single-family home. So, in regards to repairs, so these were actually kind of low figures, in my opinion. In answer to the question, does your current residents need home repairs, like a new roof, electrical roof, etc., to improve your ability to live in it safely for the next 5 years? Only 14% of people 60 and older reported that, yes, they need repairs, but they can't afford it. So that's what the numbers bore out, but I'm having a hard time believing it. And 9% said that they need modification. 9% of people over the age of 60 reported that who were respondents for the survey, reported that they need modifications but can't afford them. Again, that number feels really low. compared to my anecdotal sense of what things are like, but.
Well,
this is
unless
a
they
s-
have
this is a
family
survey.
or somebody that's helping
Yeah.
them out, you know.
Or haven't identified what they could have that would make life easier, because it's so easy to just lose track of what is out there,
Yeah.
you know? Okay, population projection. Okay, this is interesting. Easthampton's population included 3,500 residents aged 60 or older in 2010. By 2035, this number is expected to swell to 5,200, between 5,200 and 6,200, and residents aged 60 and older are expected to make up more than 35% of the population by 2035. That's only in 15 years, 16.
You guys are gonna need a bigger building.
I know, yeah, a lot of this is about how we
You
can
need it now.
improve, and, we do need it now. Opportunities to adapt current housing, downsize, or obtain housing services are perceived as problematic in Easthampton, and it's definitely seen as, there's a perception that there is a lack of, housing that's reserved for low-income older adults, and that is definitely true. Okay, so that was it in a nutshell. But going through this, I was struck by the level to which housing emerged as a topic.
Yeah.
I definitely think it's really good data to include in our housing production plan update. Yeah, I think it's really good, information.
Good, and I'll be thinking again about how to dovetail some of these figures with what I'm seeing here. And I looked at the US Census site last night and just noticed that the American communities, that part of
Yeah,
what they
American
do.
Community Survey.
Right, so that's more updated than the census, of course, and so
Yes.
we have way more recent 5-year intervals to look at. So there is a lot of updated data that we can use already,
Right.
or whomever ends up with this task can use. But I was just heartened to see that we don't need to wait till 2020 to update numbers.
Well, and with the way the census is done in the past, and the level of dysfunction of the current federal
Right,
level.
Oh, is it?
The 2010
kinda-
census, we did not get data released from the federal government until 2014.
Oh, for goodness sake.
And that was with,
Okay.
and that was with,
Right.
a-
So
and that
it's
was with.
distant future.
And that was with like
Okay.
a very seemingly functional,
Right, yeah, in a pro-census
Seemingly.
government.
well, but now we have one that's seemingly dysfunctional
Yes.
and,
Seemingly.
Dysfunctional.
yeah.
Trying so hard to be polite.
Very good.
The camera's
I
on.
know, the camera wasn't on, let me tell you.
No, thank you, Haley. I thought it was, I didn't read the whole thing, but I did read,
Would not
read
expect that.
It's-
the housing parts, this afternoon, and I think it's really fascinating, and I think, 6 months ago, or even a year ago, we were hearing murmurings from other committees about lack of senior housing, and
Mhm.
it felt all very anecdotal, and nobody had any data, so I think that this gives us some data.
Yeah.
And so I think it's, interesting to think about,
Yeah.
what.
I
that
think
means.
having you on this committee is a really wonderful liaison, you know
Oh,
that?
thanks, Alita.
I really do.
Oh,
Yeah,
appreciate that.
So I feel like we've talked about this a few times, and maybe I just don't remember. How are we gonna pay for the housing production plan update? We don't know.
We don't know.
Okay.
So.
Did we have an idea?
Just stop right there.
Okay, so
Can we ask CPA?
there's, the housing production plan expires August 19th, 2020.
Right, so we have a little time.
Mhm.
We have plenty of time because there's no, once it expires, we don't need it's helpful information to have.
Right.
It's really useful to make the case for why we need to apply for CPA funding for different projects, or how we can, what we should be doing in zoning to change the ordinances, and
Right.
what, so it's a really useful document. But I guess what I'm getting is the expiration date is kind of irrelevant because we haven't met the plan's goals.
Right,
This
so
is
it's
just-
not enforceable, well, it doesn't
Nothing bad
come,
happens.
but it doesn't come with the,
Well, so this is There's two once the plan is, so this was accepted by DHCD, and then it becomes,
Like ratified or something,
yeah, there's like,
approved.
If we met the 10%, it would be important, but
well,
because we
yeah,
haven't,
but so
it's
what,
not.
it right, and so with this production plan, if we meet our yearly goals of production, then we can say no to 40B developments, which is all that,
This
like
does, right?
legally this does.
Can you explain that? Because I was trying to like, I was feeling really ignorant on, well, like, what's the benefit of that? What's the benefit of being able to deny?
Say no. So I think, I mean, I think it depends on the project, right? Western Mass does not see a lot of really ugly, onerous 40B projects,
Well,
but,
but look at, what is it, Sunderland?
right,
And
That's
that's been,
true.
and that's been very
Very
messy for like many, many years.
so
with-
if we had a proposal from a developer under 40B that everybody hated, it was 300 units and it was,
all on Greenfield.
right, and, it was really, then, if we had met our goal of 35 units a year or whatever it is, we could deny it. Otherwise, you can't really deny it unless it's like a health or safety violation.
Right.
There are no other code restrictions or zoning restrictions
No, so
in
once-
place that can put the brakes on that?
No, because
No.
that's
It overrides it.
the 40B comprehensive permit overrides zoning, overrides all of the local
Why is
controls.
that a thing? Why
It
can
was,
that be done?
so
Because it
in
builds
the
affordable
in
housing.
the 60s,
Mhm.
municipalities were creating things like, every lot needs to have 3 acres, every, they're just creating these, there was, the nickname for it at the time was called the anti-snob zoning law, was 40B. So it was, we needed affordable housing, we weren't building it, the state said, well, we're gonna give developers you need to have this 10%. If you don't meet that 10% threshold, then developers can come in with a comprehensive permit and bypass all of the local zoning controls that are stopping projects, and you can't say no to the project for anything other than like legitimate health and safety issues.
It's a piece of fair housing legislation.
Yeah.
So it's kind of counterintuitive that process, that category of development is important to be able to say no to.
Well, so that's what the 10% number is. Once you're over 10%, then you can say no to these projects that basically strip communities of their local control.
Yes, and I'm hearing that, but the original intent of those
Where-
kinds of projects was to force communities
Mhm.
to accept,
To build affordable
To build
housing.
build affordable
yeah.
housing.
Yeah.
Right, so it was
Okay.
a carrot and stick.
Right.
It was build affordable housing that you want to see,
Mhm.
and you can say no to the type of affordable housing you don't wanna see.
Right.
Mhm.
But you
And-
have to have
Right.
that 10% affordable housing in order to have the liberty of saying
Yeah,
no.
right.
Yes.
Or you need to have a certified
It's sort of a catch-21.
affordable housing, a housing production plan. If you have a certified,
Oh, okay.
And meet the goal that that the state sets every year of how many units to build,
right,
which
so-
is 35.
So for us, it was 35 units of affordable housing per year,
Right.
would have allowed us, while this plan is in effect,
Mhm.
to say no.
35 more per year or 35 in total?
Total.
35 per year.
So the one year that we met this goal was the year that
Parsons
Parsons
Cottage, yeah.
and 15 Cottage came online at the same time, and the plan was not ratified. or
That's
certified.
crazy.
But, I mean, I think, what I wanna say about 40B is it's also a really important tool.
Mhm.
So some communities, for example, the East Street Habitat Project, is a 40B. Because Habitat wanted a 0 lot line, so that there was no, so that they could build what looks like a duplex, but technically, like, the wall between Alita's unit and her neighbor's unit is the lot line.
Mhm.
So they each own each side, and they can only do that with 40B.
Because otherwise, the zoning would have required that
Okay.
each house been in
So
that
it can
district
be
35 feet apart from each other.
Utilized for
Right.
positive.
And so
ends.
that is actually is called the friendly 40B.
Right.
Because when was it Habitat came to the city and said, we wanna do this thing, and there was no objections, and the city was on board for it, and it was just, let's use 40B to get around this zoning that's making this project unaffordable.
Okay. Well, thank you for explaining it, because I've been, it's kind of been breaking my brain to read the paragraph about it a few times, like, I'm not getting it, but now I understand.
Yeah, and I mean, I think it's a great tool, and I think that it can be used really well, and it can be used really poorly.
Yep.
I used to work for an agency that did compliance monitoring for 40B projects, and I've seen some really ugly 40B projects. But I've seen some really beautiful ones. Mountain View Condos on East Street is a 40B. Treehouse is a 40B.
Yep, the 15 Cottage Street's a 40B.
Parsons Village is a
Parsons
40B.
Village. We've done, in Easthampton, there's been a lot of friendly 40B, working with developers to create well-designed projects that fit the neighborhood and the character, and where the 40B process is streamlining some of the pieces that get in the way from making these 40, 50 unit projects happen.
Mountain View is affordable?
Yeah, there's 10 affordable units.
Oh. Affordable homeownership?
Yeah, they're condos.
Yep. And the state offers technical assistance, so when Easthampton has had 40B projects, the state will basically pay for a consultant to come out and help the zoning board, like, get the project that they want, so they don't feel railroaded by the developer, and it helps the conversation. But it's been really contentious in other communities, particularly in Eastern Mass. It's
Oh my
been
God.
really
It reminds me,
hard.
has One Ferry Street responded at all about putting in some affordable housing in that project?
Well,
I
they,
haven't heard anything.
yeah.
other
Is
than
it, did
what-
it get approved?
No, we're still waiting for them to come back on something, but I'm not sure when the next, scheduled, I don't know if they have a scheduled date for the next planning, for another planning board, or if it's on hold for some reason. I should know that, but I don't.
And
How
we-
much CPA money does the city of Easthampton get? Like annually?
We raise about 400,000 in local, from local taxes. And then the last couple of years, we've received about 100,000 or so from the state. But that number keeps dropping, so
How do they determine how much of that money goes to CPA?
it's part of the,
Percentage or
it's part of the
something?
law that
Legislation
created it.
created that.
But it's 3% of the tax, 3% of the taxes that are, it's not 3% of the tax bill, it's not 3% tax, it's 3% of the 15% that is taxed for property. So it's a percentage of a percent.
When it was first enacted, it was, the state
And
was
there's-
gonna give 100% match, but that has dwindled.
That fizzled out.
There's also an
I haven't
exemption
any.
for the first $100,000 of property, and you can get senior exemptions to the CPA tax, but I think you have to do that through the assessors, and I'm not really sure what that process looks like.
Okay, anything else on this? On housing production plan or the council on aging report? Okay, thank you, Haley, for that update and for providing it to us. So you know what's funny about the agenda is that I wrote CDBG hearing, and I really actually meant CPA hearing because I didn't go. But then I got the email from you about the CDBG hearing, and I was like, oh,
And I just
it's like I knew that it was coming. So,
Psychic.
Yeah.
so I don't know if you want to provide an update on both.
Okay.
'Cause-
Well, so CDBG is probably more relevant to this group right now.
It's next Monday, right?
It's this coming Monday, February 4th at 6 p.m. And this hearing, it's gonna be a brief hearing to basically hear about what the city's proposing for the 2019 application to the state for funding. We were supposed to have the hearing yesterday, but with the inclement weather, no one showed up. So we had a snow date planned for February 4th, so we are going ahead with the snow date of February 4th as the public hearing.
Was it really that inclement?
Well,
It was windy.
For a
It
short
was
time,
snowing
it's
a
pretty
little bit.
It was
nasty.
snowing a
And
little
it was
bit.
right at 6 o'clock, and the National Weather Service said, stay home, so,
Oh, so everybody is.
so,
That's-
we're,
I understand.
we think everyone just got the message that the snow, it was canceled. Anyway, so the project that we're applying for, we have limited funding that we can apply for because we got the full grant last year, so that reduces the amount we can apply for this year. We're planning to apply for the next phase of public infrastructure improvements along Maple Street, which is a project that was started in 2014. And if you come to the hearing, you'll hear more about that. And depending on how much funding we can, like, how much funding we apply for and what the actual bids come in, there'll be some leftover money that we will then be able to use for housing rehab at the end of that, after construction's complete.
So that would be applied to the housing rehab program. Do I understand correctly?
Well, it would be a new housing rehab program, yes. But that's subject to availability of funds, depending on, so if we get the grant that we're applying for,
How much is it?
it's 552 is what we're allowed.
Mhm.
552,000 is what we're allowed. The estimate for the public infrastructure improvements come in at like 547.
Okay.
But there's inflation factors and contingencies that are all part of that. So assuming that those are actually more than generous, the actual construction work will be something less, and those should be maybe, $40,000 or $50,000, depending on when it's bid, how much the low bid is. It could be more. The last time this happened, we had $108,000 that we're able to transfer from the construction project at the end of the project to housing rehab. That was a bigger project. That was an $800,000 construction project.
Does the community center get funded through CDBG?
No,
No. Do you have any social service?
we don't. We used to have a bunch of social service programs. So social services is funded through the CDBG program. They have to be targeted towards, or they have to benefit low and moderate income individuals. But examples can be, they run one in Holyoke, they have a therapeutic horseback riding, and it's run.
Jericho?
What's it?
Jericho?
I don't know the name of it. We funded, is it Yes? You see them on the rail trail with the four-wheeled bicycles?
Outdoor adventure.
Outdoor
They're
adventure,
recumbent.
Yeah, so they got some money through Easthampton and I think.
All Out Adventure, sorry.
All Out Adventure, yeah, thank you. The food pantry would be an eligible type expense. The problem is that because we're not needy enough to get the money on a consistent basis, it's really hard to put through a social service program.
That's
on
gonna
an
be
app-
subject to fluctuating funding.
Exactly,
Yeah.
so we might get funded 1 year, and then might do 2 or 3 years before we get funded again. And so what we've found is that the social services, we'd like to be able to fund them, there's too much variability,
Mhm.
and so,
We get CDBG at work for our food pantry from Greenfield,
Right, but,
and then Shelburne and Buckland. And Shelburne this year was not eligible to apply because they hadn't spent their CDBG award from the previous year on their
Yeah.
infrastructure project.
yeah,
So we were looking at a $25,000 loss, and they got an exemption from DHCD, so they're able to apply, which is great.
Right.
But Shelburne is in a similar, like Shelburne is also becoming less needy, and so I have concerns about future years about not getting, if they don't get funded, then we have a problem. So I can see that that would be,
Yeah.
yeah, okay.
So, so because of that, we've sort of taken the approach of, well, we're going after housing rehab and infrastructure improvements, and, that's sort of where we,
Mhm.
where if we don't get funding one year, we're not in the worst, it's not the senior center, it's not being able to pay their employees or the
Right,
food pantry.
you're not developing a dependence that's going to
Yeah,
be a problem.
Yeah.
but theoretically, the senior center or the food pantry, they are eligible,
Mhm.
we could create social service packets to make that application.
How about a building improvement for the Council on Aging?
That is public, yes, that can work too.
Mhm.
For CBDG?
Yeah, so you can do, senior centers are a big one that are used, there's some complications with, long-term use of it and like, but,
It's a historic structure too, so I think that's a complication.
yeah, it's specifically for Easthampton, because that building's on the National Register.
Could it be used for could town, like some of the,
Yeah, that's what I'm.
Town lodging was, the original improvements in 2000 were funded by CDBG,
okay.
as well as, the 21 Adams Street, I think. So those are the two that have subsidized housing, or their units count on the SHI.
Mm.
Because they received CDBG funds, the requirement at the time was to have those,
Can you use CDBG again at the
Yes.
same property?
yes.
And this group would apply to CBDG, or?
The city
The city
applies
would.
on behalf of, so in this case, it's the planning department, is working with Pioneer Valley Planning Commission, and we're, but through this public hearing, where and there was a previous, public meeting, at the beginning of January, where we invite everyone to come and try to listen to what people are interested in and how we can, strategize the needs of the community and funding implementation, and then looking at all those great ideas and, trying to see, well, which ones match up with the grant limitations and
Yeah.
which ones are feasible to come up with a program in 3 weeks, and,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
which ones are gonna be, a year or longer for us to get the information that we need before we can then do an application, so.
Yeah.
It might be worth thinking down the line in terms of housing stuff. Amherst uses their CBDG money and their CPA money in very interesting ways involving housing things. Like, so
Mhm.
they've created, I think it's with their CPA money, where they kind of, I mean, they're much richer than us, but, they basically almost created like I mean, we can't do this, but they basically subsidize some new development,
Yeah.
using their CPA money, and they,
Yeah.
with CDBG, they fund, Amherst Community Connections, and basically what that helps is, you don't have to be elderly, but folks who are struggling with homelessness or housing insecurity, basically they kind of help them get connected to things. So there's just some creative things that,
Yeah.
but I don't know enough about the CBDG
Well,
process.
Yeah, and the CDBG, again, Amherst is I think they're a mini entitlement community.
I think they
They
do,
get their
yeah.
funding every year from the state, and so they can do these social services where, and the other complications, CDBG does not fund typically creation of new housing units. They will do rehab of the existing housing units, and they'll do, reuse of existing buildings to be converted to housing, but they won't fund a new, like,
New construction.
new construction, but CPA can be used to fund
Right,
new
okay.
construction.
Hmm.
Um,
I was just thinking about with one, not one cottage.
One
ferry.
One ferry,
Mm.
that I feel, I mean, Amherst just has a lot more money to play with, but I don't know how it came about, but somehow it was in the development, that's how they kind of created the affordability So, I don't think we have that option, but it was just,
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
it's interesting.
yeah, they do kind of creative things, but they also can't use, they're so unaffordable that no one can live there basically, so if you have a Section 8 voucher, you
Right.
can't live in Amherst.
Right. Unless you've been there for 10 years
Yeah,
already.
yeah.
Alright. And then CPA hearing,
So
that,
this is the annual meeting?
yeah, the one that happened already, that
We-
nobody went to, cause didn't open your email until the day after the hearing, and I was like, oh, I can't go.
I don't know, we haven't had the CPA.
I thought you had some meeting. No?
We had the CDBG public,
Or maybe that's what it
I think
was.
that's what it was.
yes, that was at the beginning of January.
Oh,
So that was our planning,
okay,
like the planning strategy meeting.
okay. I
the
guess
precursor
that's
to
what
this.
it
The CPA will be meeting, I think in March for their
Okay.
annual meeting.
was. Okay,
And I will be
You'll let us know.
spamming you all with email about it.
Right, okay.
um,
alright, so that,
in
we
the
didn't miss
next
it.
couple weeks.
Nothing invited
Okay.
meetings.
Okay. Cause I do think it's good to go to the CPA
Yeah.
meeting and talk about what we're doing, and
Mhm.
so they
Mhm.
know what to
Give them
expect.
some warning, yeah.
Yeah, so I think last year I had all these things I was giving them warning about, and then we didn't actually
Didn't do
come
it.
see them, but that's okay, they like to just know what we're working
Yeah.
on.
I'm gonna also revise what I said, you know, Amherst also, it could have been the trust that paid for it.
Yeah, they have a housing
Yeah,
trust.
actually,
Yeah.
more of a little for, I thought, how could CPA money pay for that? And then I realized.
What is a housing trust?
Interesting question.
I thought-
So we talked about this last month, it's like an entity that you set up, you could, and then you put money into it, so you could put CPA money into it, you could
Yeah,
put,
yeah.
if we had like some other fees that we charge developers, or something, we could put it into it. And then it allows the city to buy property, to, do other sort of
Deals like. yeah.
transactional
Yeah.
deals that normally would take us like 9 months
Sort of a
to.
miscellaneous pile.
Well, it's for for affordable housing.
Yeah.
But like if a house came on the market and we decided we wanted to buy it because we were gonna deed restrict it,
Right.
the city couldn't do that
Mm-hmm.
in a timely fashion, but theoretically a trust could
Right.
do that. We talked about it last month as something to explore more in our next housing production plan, because we've talked about it before, and previous administrations have not been super excited about it. It takes a little bit of control away from the current way things work, so like
Right.
city council and wouldn't necessarily, CPA committee, or wouldn't necessarily get the same process wouldn't happen, so,
But a lot of things come out in Northampton and Amherst, a lot of things come out of it that wouldn't come out of the city council. So like Northampton uses their trust in a really interesting way. They kind of contracted with the social service agency to kind of help prevent people from losing their housing. Like they do
Yeah.
some neat things that probably, I don't think, well, Northampton's pretty out there, but I don't think that would have gone through the city council. Like, so,
right.
Well, yeah, I mean, we did, so at the start of the year, we were talking about the first-time homebuyer program, which, this is the second time in recent memory that the city's done a first-time homebuyer program. The first time was actually with CDBG funds, and concurrently, we ran a foreclosure prevention program. Both of those were actually run by Valley CDC, and so that's where we have been successful to do social service stuff, is where we can have an organization like Valley CDC that's managing to cobble together a lot of different resources, and
Yeah.
we're just, a little bit of money to them for a year or two, but they're constantly doing these things to kind of keep their funding up. And
I was wondering how that worked, because they're dealing with people that want to buy homes in Northampton, Easthampton, I'm not even sure what their territory is.
Hadley,
Hadley.
Easthampton, Northampton, Amherst, and Hadley is their territory.
I think it's a pretty amazing outfit myself. Can I ask a off-the-wall question here? I was talking to Jane Anderson from Habitat. She's on the board of directors. And they're still sort of quasi-interested in Everett Street, so I said I would at least ask to see if I could find out some basic information. Because it's still sitting there,
Mhm.
doing nothing, right? Do you know how big that lot is roughly?
Not off the top of my head.
Do you think it's bigger than a half acre? No idea.
You could have done, what was it before? You could have done,
I know that the original plan was gonna be 4 units of,
was that gonna be a 40B with 4 units?
I don't know, this started
Yeah, I was
with,
gonna
it
ask
started
you,
with
how many
Stewart.
units can you put in one section as a 40B? I mean, like, my house is a 40B and it's 2 homes connected with a 0 lot line.
It
Can you do
depends-
that with like 4 of them?
I mean, it depends
You
on.
can?
Depends on the size of the lot.
It depends on what's gonna be affordable for the project,
Right.
and depends on what waivers they're asking for. But they start with the base zoning, and then they have to ask waivers to it.
Okay.
I think they were originally gonna put 4 detached units.
I thought they were gonna do a rehab on the,
Right, they're gonna do one rehab and then,
and then
Then
4
I
units?
think they decided that the house was gonna come down. I
There
don't
was-
remember.
Yeah, they were balking over who was gonna pay for the demolition. Cause I guess the house turned out not to, be, according to Jane, she said the house turned out not to be worth rehabbing, so it would have to be demolished, and who would pay for that, you know, them or Easthampton or what? I have no clue what it would cost to,
well,
you know,
if
tear down a house.
if you're, talk to her again, I would ask, you know, invite her to, come talk to me or Jeff from the planning department. and
Yeah,
what-
I think she was gonna go and see if there's any interest on her side of the fence, you know, and I was gonna get what information I could, but yeah, I'll talk to her about that.
Yeah.
Have you heard any I had a conversation with the mayor about that property a while ago. Like, have you heard anything that the city might move on anything? No.
I haven't heard anything recently. The last I had heard was, under Mayor Karen. And then I had heard it got, that they wanted, because Habitat's contract expired to do the work,
Oh,
the
really?
city took, yeah, so the city, there was a RFP that Habitat responded to. They were supposed to build those units on Everett Street before they did your 2 units.
Yeah.
Then Habitat decided that they wanted, because of the construction, the demolition and all the, they decided it was easier to just go forward and do your house first. And then that project stalled, and then
They
I
gave
think
it back to the
they-
city.
They gave it back to the city, and then.
But it would be available for free, right?
It
No, so
was.
There has to be a new RFP process
Yeah.
that goes forward with it. Anyways, and then they, under Mayor Cadger, she was trying to basically sell it market rate. It got complicated because of something to do with notice of when we took the property by eminent domain. We didn't properly notice all of the heirs to the property. Which then goes, now it's like the last I heard was that it's in court or land court or something where they're trying to figure out that bit of it.
Wow.
So
I
it's
don't
not
know.
really available yet.
Well, I don't know, because this was like maybe a couple years ago that I heard all this. I don't know how much of it is,
Yeah, who
Just-
would know?
So I had a
Well-
conversation with the mayor like in November where and I didn't know that she said the land court stuff had been wrapped up, and I actually didn't know that that was even happening.
okay.
And that, you know, she wanted to talk about it, but then we haven't actually talked about it,
So
so
last I
don't know.
heard, it was still in land court, and,
Because what Habitat's doing now, they were interested in doing tiny homes. I'm not talking about the ones on wheels, okay? Like maybe, I think, 300 square foot or some darn thing. They're pretty little, 400. So they had a lot of troubles with how much land you need to have around them and this, you know, a bunch of different issues. So they're calling them big enough. They're about 600 square feet. And they have some variations, of course. And it depends on how many people are in it, but there's some really clever uses of the space, all right? And, I don't know, like Northampton gave them some land. I don't know all the specifics on it, but they gave them a good piece of land, and they put a bunch of them up there, you know, and they're fairly close together. And this is pretty much what I was envisioning, you know, like a little cluster build. I don't know how many clusters Habitat's willing to do, but you know, with like one driveway, and do basically a homeowners association kind of thing. So your driveway can be plowed and your lawn can be mowed. Because right now we're having a life and death battle over our shared driveway. None of us can shovel it. None of us has the money to plow it. The only one that has a snow blower is me, and I couldn't afford to fix it until yesterday.
Oh, what a pain.
Oh yeah, it's like
Yeah, that's really
it's like two
not fun
cats,
to
you know,
be dealing
fighting.
with.
It's been fun, but just make a little community there. And you could dedicate it to just, you know, low income or veterans or single moms or whatever, you know, do whatever you want with it, but I still think that there's something we can do with that.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a neat
Does
spot.
Yeah.
Does Easthampton have a lot of tax title stuff?
I
Like
don't
where
know.
the city
I know,
takes?
I don't know.
That's okay.
I know that in the past we have, but usually when we take things tax title, I don't know anything about it, cause it's all happening upstairs.
It doesn't go to
There's no
affordable housing, it goes elsewhere.
Yeah, it goes either sold at auction or,
Cause I know, yeah, Northampton sometimes with their tax title will,
right, I mean, it's a great opportunity when we have a tax title, when we have a property that is easy to convert to affordable housing.
Yeah.
If we had a housing trust,
that's why I was asking.
Right.
that could be a thing, I
Oh,
think.
they could do things like bring that building down.
I mean, if the housing trust can
Right.
just do things that the municipality itself, like we, the housing partnership, can't buy a house and renovate it and sell it as affordable housing. So, but,
Yeah, that you wouldn't use your housing trust, you wouldn't wanna usually use it for one thing. I mean, you're using it for the greater good.
Okay.
But I'm just looking at other municipalities. So city of Northampton, sometimes when someone can't pay their taxes, they, you know, they take back the land, they'll donate it or they'll give it to the trust and to do something else with it.
So the trust can exist as an attractive repository for something like that.
Yeah,
to
it's
link with
usually, I'm just thinking
bills.
about it with Habitat, that, you know, that they've sometimes, they have a piece of property, they could sell it, or they could donate it,
Right.
or they do, City of Northampton also has Friends of that, they have some cool things, they have private fundraisers that then,
Oh, yeah,
Goes
they
into
have
the trust.
quite a
Yeah.
network in
Yeah,
place.
and if we had an inclusionary zoning bylaw,
yeah.
we could force developers to build affordable units, or if they don't build affordable units, we can force them to pay into the trust, and then we use that money to
To-
create
right,
affordable
yeah.
units.
Let's get a trust.
Yeah,
Well,
we
but
need
the-
a
yeah,
trust.
you're right with the, yeah, that you have to
I
have
forgot
that.
all about it.
Yeah.
Part of the reason why they're
One more
so
question.
rich is because they do,
Because they have the inclusionary zoning bylaw,
yeah.
which we don't have,
we got a lot to do, guys.
yeah. It's an
Yeah.
There's a
attract-
lot to learn.
yeah.
No, but that is why their trust is pretty rich, I mean, because but basically if you're not developing, I think probably Amherst is richer.
Yeah.
Basically, the Amherst, if you're not developing all those, I didn't even think about that, all those new,
Yeah, every time they do
Yeah.
development, it's,
That reminds me.
and the last I heard, it's something like 250,000 per unit, 300,000 per unit on average statewide to like create a unit of housing. So when you're a developer, they get a very good deal when the inclusionary zoning bylaw says, build a unit or pay $100,000. They're like, yes, I'll pay the 100, but when the,
right,
when the fine is a lot higher, then they end up building one of the problems with it though is that then the trust has to spend the money. They have to build the units or they have to, and it's another board,
Well, I
it's
think
another
we
group
could
of
probably
people.
manage that.
yeah. But they do kinda go hand in hand, that if you don't have any money in your trust unless you have money in your trust.
Right,
And
and,
it has to
and,
be- yeah.
and CPA can give money to the trust, but then CPA loses control of that money.
Which is why
Which is why last time we talked about this, which is years ago, everybody was like, no, that sounds like a terrible idea. Why would we want to give it control?
But unless you have the bylaw.
Right.
Well, you
yeah.
probably wouldn't wanna ask CPA for money unless you had something particular in mind to do with it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But the CPA can give the housing trust money
Mhm.
without a particular anything. They can
Okay.
just say.
They can give an unrestricted gift.
Yeah, well, basically, they take the money that's normally set aside for housing, and they can send all of that money to the trust, and then the trust has to use that for affordable housing, and so any of their expenditures qualify for the CPA, and then the CPA loses
Yeah.
that control of.
Boy, it gets complicated.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, does
It always
anybody
gives
have-
you a headache.
Well, so speaking of complicated, I just thought of this. So Mass Housing Partnership, every year, I thought I saw something about it, maybe it's
Yeah.
not posted yet, has what they call a housing institute. It's
Yes.
for 2 days.
They save the date.
Is that what I got?
Yeah,
It was a
um,
save the date. It's usually in June. It's in Devon's. And
Do we know where
it's,
that
Where's
is?
that?
it's like
It's-
near Fitchburg.
Yeah.
Central?
Eastern.
Central?
It's central,
Like,
but
it's
it's
on Route 2, so it's like,
On Route 2, easy, yep.
and they encourage, that what they want is people like us, town officials, housing partnerships.
June 5th and 6th.
Can you forward that to us? Is that the save the date?
Mm-hmm.
What's it called again?
The Mass Housing Partnership Housing Institute.
Okay, so that.
I've gone a few times. It's really, really good, especially if, the housing is complicated. So they have different workshops.
Yeah.
Mayor Mike got an award one year, on affordable housing stuff. But it's a great way to kind of learn about what some of these resources are, and it's
Yeah.
really geared
Strategies.
toward, town officials, housing partnerships.
And people who are new to the field.
People who are new, they talk about housing trusts, they do, different workshops, so, and I think, is it free? It's free. No, it's not free.
There's a cost to attend,
Okay,
but,
I don't know what it is.
they didn't, I think last year it was like $50 or $100 if you were a municipal employee or
So
board
it's really,
member.
it's affordable.
Yeah, it's designed, and they serve breakfast and lunch and buffets and.
It's a 1 day or 2 days?
It was like
2
2
days.
2 days.
Yeah.
So you need a hotel room?
No, you can, I drove
That
back
far.
and forth. There were people that stayed out there.
But I would encourage anybody who is interested to check it out, cause it is really good, and it is geared toward lay people to kind of, and you come back with a lot of ideas and like,
Yeah.
I think I have at least 2 binders of stuff that I've kept, so. And you get to meet other people from other, neighboring communities and stuff, so it can be a good way to,
Yeah, learn something.
learn something and get a better handle on some of this stuff.
Okay, one more quick question.
Okay.
Back to Everett Street. Assuming it gets through the courts and it's cleared out and it's ours to do what we want with it, and.
It's not ours, the city's.
Well, the city, yeah.
Yeah.
And assuming Habitat is interested, would we pay for the demolition of the house? Or split it, or?
I mean, again, the
How
city
does
would,
that
the
work?
city would RFP it out. I mean, either the city would sell it,
It would depend on what we've decided.
yeah.
So if the RFP happens that the city thinks the value of the house needs to be, if the house is important and it needs to stay up, then the RFP will say that no demolition of the house.
Okay.
If the RFP is, less restricted, they'll say, we don't care what you do with the property, whoever pays us the most money can have the property, or, who's ever willing to take down this house and build 4 units of housing, affordable housing. The city makes when the city puts
Criteria.
together the RFP, we put together the criteria of what the developer has to respond to.
And that's a planning department
I mean,
task, or?
it depends, right now it's the mayor's office and the finance director, they're the ones who.
They make a lot of land use decisions.
They make the tax title decisions, and that's how we ended up with this property.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think at the time, when it started, Mayor Mike and Stewart and the Housing Partnership and CPA was sort of.
We've had 2 unsuccessful bids at affordable housing on this property.
Mhm.
So the first one was that crazy, like, tiered, like if you were gonna build 6 units, you could have it for 20,000. If you were gonna build 4 units, you could have it for 80,000. It was this crazy thing, and nobody bid. So then we went out and bid it again, and then Habitat responded, and then gave it back because they weren't gonna be able to do it for 8 years. And it was like, we're not gonna keep waiting.
How do you
for you.
advertise this kind of stuff? Is there some
Oh
kind
yeah,
of a?
well, it's the same thing that Jamie said, it's in the paper, it's on combis, there's rules about where it has to be advertised. So I think, you're right, I mean, the city has to decide what they want to do with this property.
So it's still just an idle piece of property.
Right.
Does this group make recommendations
Yes.
Yes.
to the mayor?
We are an
Yes.
advisory group.
Yeah, so we could make
Strictly.
recommendations to the mayor of all, yes,
In writing?
yeah,
Yeah.
That's usually, you've had meetings with the mayor.
yeah. I mean, yeah, we could make it, we could say, we really want this Everett Street project to be affordable housing. And yes, we can make recommendations. We had the mayor invited Valley CDC and Wayfinders, I don't know, like 3 or 4 months ago to talk about affordable housing, and she invited me, so we got to talk to them about, some at that time we were sort of talking a little bit about One Ferry, but then also some other mill buildings where she thought that the owners might be a little bit more interested in affordable housing, and, I mean, I will say she's really proactive, so she definitely wants to see things happening. But yeah, we can, that's really our main goal, is to be advisory. We don't really have any other power. Yeah, right. All right, anything else
One
you
last,
need to know?
one last thing.
Yeah.
A couple copies of this, from CHAPA. There's legislative priorities, for housing. Tomorrow's the last day for legislators to sign up as co-sponsors for these legislations.
Okay.
So if you feel so inclined to contact, any legislators, about any of these lists of, legislation, this is what CHAPA thinks is important. The last one on the list is with regard to CPA, and increasing the CPA, trust fund, that's where we get our state match from. So if you're interested,
Thank you.
Thank you.
please reach out to your legislators before the end of the day.
When's the next meeting?
Oh, when is our next meeting? We usually meet the 4th Thursday at 6, though Barbara still thinks it's 5:45, so I have to fix that. So the next meeting would be 1, 2, 3, 4, the 28th of February
Okay, 6.
at 6.
Are we gonna revisit the idea of going over the HPP PowerPoint at the other, in the
Oh.
other conference room?
We could
What's
read
HPP?
the housing production plan.
Ah.
At our December meeting, we had a plan to go, we had a PowerPoint presentation that PVPC made for us when we did the housing production plan, that we showed to interested community members. And we were going to look at it together at the December meeting,
And then I
but
was sick.
Jamie was sick, and I couldn't, like, make the well, we didn't even try to make the equipment work, but like, I felt like that was a barrier to making the equipment work. But we could revisit it if people wanted to do that at February meeting.
Is it useful? I'm trying to think about what's a good action item for each of us to kind of leave here with and, do. What can we do for homework that will further us?
Give her pink.
Where'd we get her?
I know. Well, I
I know,
think,
but she's gonna give homework.
I think our
I
biggest,
homework. I live to read between meetings.
I think our biggest homework is coming to the CPA meeting on the 26th.
Okay, I think that's great.
Yeah.
And for anybody who can go on Monday to the CDBG hearing, I cannot. But,
I think I can.
This
Okay.
Monday?
Six.
I'm
That's
planning on
what?
it.
It should be a short meeting.
if anyone, maybe you'll be the only one that shows up.
Okay.
Yeah, if you're here, it'll be in this conference room, so.
Oh, it's in here, the little
Yeah.
room?
Which one are we talking about?
The CDBG hearing, that's on Monday.
And does this group have like,
Okay.
I do know the housing production plan. Does this group have like priority, I mean, the housing production plan is like big.
Yes,
So
I-
does this group have like, we have
Yes.
priorities from, so for example, like, you know, if you've got a full-time employee like Peg Keller, you know, makes priorities like increase the housing stock. Does this group have priorities already established from
So-
the housing production plan?
We do, and we revisit them every now and then, so I can, yeah,
So
there's.
you actually use the action plan as the agenda items?
We do, and then every year we kind of say, here's the 2 or 3 that we really want to work on. So I have.
So the
Which is-
group goes within this and then,
Which is
yeah.
why I'm working on this.
Which is why we're working on town lodging.
Okay,
But
I
It's coming,
can't
it's
make
being
that,
generated from here.
Monday thing.
That's okay. But I can send you what I established as our, I can't remember.
And
It's
which
like
one
town
is
lodging,
this?
we have this ready to buy
Yeah,
thing
that's
that I
the
can.
next, that's
That's the next
That's the
thing.
next one.
Okay.
Which is, just very briefly, the big obstacle we've had with private developers developing affordable units is the marketing plan and cost associated with finding people, income qualifying, low and moderate income people, and doing a fair process to get to advertise that you have these affordable units available, because you can't just pick somebody randomly, you can't choose your best
To
friend.
maintain a list and
Yeah, and
list
so-
criteria.
Cause we have smaller projects with local developers mostly, instead
So
of
we have some
big guys.
incentive in our zoning for developing affordable units, density bonuses and things like that, but when the developers find out that like, well, you could go from 4 units on your property to 5 units, but 1 or 2 of them has to be affordable, and the cost to do that affordable unit is the same cost as the market rate unit, but now you have to do all this additional work.
Yeah.
And they're developers and builders, and they're not property managers that are going to be necessarily here for 15 years on that site, making sure that it's always.
So the
This
26th
is
is
mostly
the
for like,
CPA meeting?
affordable home ownership.
At
It's
6?
mostly for rental work, it's
Time?
complicated.
6:30.
Homeownership is easy. Because you have your initial lottery, and then it's deed restricted on the, and, you don't get kicked out of your home when your income goes up. You don't have to do monitoring of that
Right.
property every year.
You're
Right.
talking about 6 units, you get 2, because part of the problem is affordable, are you talking 80% AMI, or what are you talking about? And is there a subsidy attached? Well, we could do it next meeting too.
Yeah,
Yeah, and
I don't think I understand your, but yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
It's a project to try
To
to make
explain
it easier for developers to, where they would do what they do best, which is building the units, and we would have some sort of contract with an agency or something like that would maintain the lists and do the marketing plans and the outreach.
Like
and-
what? Like wayfinders, for example, somebody who could come in and who manages properties and understands how to maintain a list and keep it fair and monitor incomes and do all the,
Right.
that goes along with it.
Cause
Let's
these,
talk about it, yeah,
Yeah.
more, because.
And we can talk
I've
about
done
it.
lotteries, I'm like, oh, it's not that hard, but and then I'm like, what's the subsidy attached? Okay,
but there's,
got it.
yeah, we can talk about, I can fill you in, yeah. But, yeah, so, and I can send you the priorities, we have a few that we've been
Yeah.
working on.
Cool.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks, Kate, for coming.
Nice to see you, Kate.